Hi everyone, I'm Lakshmi. I'm one of the research fellows at University of Washington, and I'm incoming PGY2 at Rutgers.
And my name is Leah. I'm a PGY3 at Rush University Medical Center.
We both present today like methods of analyzing eContour's engagement on behalf of eContour's team.
Okay, so to get started, our learning objectives today are to describe two research methodologies to assess educational outcomes, looking at a very well-known traditional pre-test versus post-test design, and then comparing that to an interrupted time series analysis or the ITSA. We're then going to analyze eContour's usage using these two research methodologies, and finally demonstrate how selecting appropriate methods are important when you're analyzing your data. Okay, so jumping right into this, having a brief overview of eContour's usage, you can see the image on the left is demonstrating that we have over 35,000 registered users with a percentage breakdown of who's using our resource. If we look at the graph on the right, what we're looking at is eContour's case views represented per month. And overall, you can see a linear growth starting from January 2019 all the way up until the end of September 2022. But we wanted to take a closer look at our data and analyze two particular time points, paying attention to the two red arrows, the first being the pandemic, March of 2020, and the second being a collaboration between ACRO and eContour, specifically in the form of MIM-funded ACRO 2022 travel grants. So diving into this a little bit further, if we analyze these two time points using a traditional pre-test versus post-test design, in this case, we're using the Wilcoxon-Rank sum test, also known as the Mann-Whitney U-test, given our data does not follow a normal distribution. And again, taking time point 1 as the pandemic, and then time point 2 as this MIM-funded ACRO travel grants for eContour. Consider anything prior to those time points, and then post anything after those individual time points. You'll see in both of these time points, we have a statistically significant increase in case views. So this is great. And before we kind of jump to conclusions, we had to determine, is this the right method of analysis that we're using for our data? Because if you go back, if you think back to the graph I showed you, our case views per month, you were already seeing a trend in the data presenting itself. So we really had to determine, is this the correct method of analysis, or should we be using something different that might help to avoid trend biases or seasonality? So with that in mind, we thought about possibly trying another analysis.
So we went through interrupted time series analysis for this kind of data. And ITSA is a statistical technique where you can see a change in the level or a trend of the data before and after the intervention has been applied. This kind of model is more applicable when you take the aggregated data sets, such as eContour case views in this case, or monthly admission rates. That's another example for the data. And here on the image on the right side, you can see the X-point intervention is applied, and the change in the slope would give you the result whether the intervention had an immediate effect or a long-term effect, or both, or no effect at all. So the rationale behind we considered this model is because it has a strong accountability for seasonality bias, which means a predictable pattern of observations given in an annual year, or a trend bias where a strong linear trend has been already happening and then your intervention may not have a significant effect at all, or an autocorrelation bias where observations close to each other tend to be pretty similar due to some external factor influences. So on the other side, the ITSA model has a limitation where a long period of data points are required before you apply this model. So let's apply this model to eContour's data. On the right side, you can see the results where the pandemic time point has given us a sustained increase in case views, almost 1,000 case views per month, which is statistically significant. And surprisingly, our MIM-funded ACRO intervention, the second time point in March 2022, did not give us the expected increase in amount of case views, although it's not statistically significant. So one possible explanation for this discordant result is because we have a limited amount of data points right after our second time point intervention, which could be reflected through a shorter slope. And the other thing is, so the case views which are increased after the pandemic are strongly controlled by the ITSA model itself.
All right, so diving into this in a little bit more detail, there's obviously some discordance in our data. From our time point number 1, the pandemic, we can see that the results are consistent across both methodologies, whether that's pre-test versus post-test or ITSA. But looking at time point number 2, there is a discordance as we demonstrated. And why exactly was this? Well, we wanted to take a step back and look at a time frame. And if you look at the bar on the line on the bottom of the screen, that's really representative of our time point. So March 2022 is when we were hoping that this would be when our cases were published live on eContour. Backtrack all the way to November of 2021. That's when our grant submission process actually starts. And what we found in our editorial process is that this is actually much more lengthy. It's taking us a lot more time to truly publish our cases because it goes through a number of steps and gold standard expert review processes as well. And so with that in mind, the real question to ask was March 2022 the appropriate time point to select? So what do we do from here? We're going to move forward and integrate our findings in our Plan, Do, Study, Act model, which is important for all sorts of educational projects and every project that is out there in terms of improving our process. So thank you so much on behalf of the eContour team. We hope that we demonstrated selecting the appropriate methodology is of significance and how you can move forward and grow from those results.